inconvenience. So we're going to hope that we have strong internet connection and strong computer that'll last us through the next 45 minutes. My name is Dr. Manny Rosa. I call myself the most electrifying administrator at Keiser University. I'm a professor in the School of Education program, and I am proud to bring to you today a session on professionalism. So this session is going to be a lot of reflecting on your own professionalism and your behaviors and attitude in the workplace, and then also providing some tips on how to get your middle school and high school students to think about professionalism. I've been doing this workshop for about maybe 4 years, and it always baffles me that I can always find recent examples of professionalism, whether we have professionalism, positive professionalism, or examples of unprofessionalism and being displayed by our celebrities or our politicians. So even though this is a topic that in some sense is common sense, there's still temptations or to act in an unprofessional manner. And I think even the definition of professionalism is being diluted or lessened because of today's society and today's culture. I always give the example of when you watch television, what used to be saved for the 10 o'clock hour, either profanity or even sometimes what people wear, or now at 8 o'clock you can see that on broadcast TV. So in general, our society is dumbing, is limiting their outlook and stretching the definition of professionalism. So with this workshop, hopefully you'll be able to, if you have a question, or you can go in the chat and or if I say something or you want to bring up a point or make a point, I'll click on the participant chat or the Q&A so we can have some interaction. Hopefully, if we have time at the end, we'll also do a Kahoot. So if you have that app, you can have that prepared as well, and we'll also be ready to download that. We'll have instructions later to download that. But by the end of this session, we'll have, hopefully you'll be able to define professionalism. We'll talk about the components of professionalism and then share some strategies for teaching professionalism. And this is where I would really like your input on the topic. So here are some questions, and you can chime in on the chat. When you think of the word professional, what image do you see? And what words best describe professional characteristics of someone in education? So I know we have some attendees. We have 6 attendees right now. So if you can chime in the chat, when you think of the word professional, what image comes to mind? It could be a person, it could be a celebrity, or someone in your family member, or someone at your school right now. But when you think of professional, what image comes to mind? Or what characteristics? All right, so Jim has said trusted and reliable, and that is actually given today's climate and today's, even if you just turn on the news today, you'll see that trust, it has been an issue that is prevalent and is being and looked at. Reliable, definitely someone that's there and that you can count on when the good times and the bad times, whether they're being looked at as a supervisor or not as a supervisor. So those are very good. Respectful, thank you very much for that, Rita. Respect is definitely something we should expect and demonstrate from our professional behaviors. So yeah, those are all very good characteristics, and we'll explore more as we continue on in this session, and feel free to keep adding to the chat as well. All right, so I always like to, for those of you who've been on my presentations, know that I always throw in a quote or an image. So I found this one when researching professionalism about Warren Buffett. And he says, in quote, "In looking for people to hire, look for three qualities: integrity, intelligence, and energy. And if they don't have the first one, the other two will kill you." So, you know, he's a very prominent figure and really talking about integrity and why that's important. And when you think about your middle school students and your high school students and your elementary school students, you know, what are some ways that we can instill integrity and because you will see some of these characteristics early on, whether they are showing up late, or maybe you have some students. I recently had a student, a teacher tell me about a student who stole his computer. So, you know, how do we teach integrity? And we need to start and do it at an early age. So that's something we're going to talk more specific strategies as we go on into the presentation. All right, so what is professionalism? And this is going to be, depending on the level that you're teaching, you're going to tweak the definition. But according to the dictionary, it's the conduct, aims, or qualities that characterizes or mark a profession or a professional person. And it does depend on the profession. If your school, it's more casual and you have teachers that are wearing polos and slacks, then, you know, that's would be the culture of that school. If it's more, you know, shirt and tie, or if it varies, if students have uniforms, or if students aren't wearing uniforms, then, you know, the professionalism is going to vary. And then teacher professionalism is defined as the knowledge, skills, and practices that teachers must have in order to be effective educators. When it comes to professionalism, depending on the age group, I would recommend is how you define it. And let's think about what are some influencers of professionalism. So the kids, the students in your classroom, the environment of the school is going to have an impact. Like I said, if it's uniforms or not uniforms, whatever the rules are, the policies are, that's going to have an influence on your particular student's professionalism. The role models, who are the adult role models in these students' lives? Some of them, that'll have an impact on how they define professionalism, or what it means to be a professional. Peers, those that are around them, the behavior that they're engaging in, that's going to have an impact. Parents, the role the parent can play in a child's life, if they're an active parent or if they're not, due to having to work or other circumstances. And then, as we all can probably guess and know, one of the biggest influences, which was not a factor decades ago, is social media and what the students are seeing. And we may like to think, you know, oh, this student's only in third grade, they don't realize what's going on. You know, we need to be a little bit more attentive of the information our students are absorbing. If you just look at the headlines today, you'll see in social media or on the news, you'll see the scandal with the celebrities, with the college admissions scandal. You'll see or hear about the Empire actor who alleged, and these are all allegedly, of course, allegedly faked and attacked. And so these are things that consciously or not, you know, our students are hearing about, and these are the behaviors that they're seeing when they're looking at their social media and their celebrities. And then, of course, teachers. You as teachers, as administrators, the professionalism that you demonstrate and that you teach and infuse into your curriculum is going to have a large impact on our students. And your impact could make the difference between how the students behave and represent themselves when they leave your school and enter either the workplace or enter higher education or whatever they decide to transition to. So how do you know here? How do you know if a student's acting unprofessional or not? And once again, you need to define what professionalism is for the student. If it's a middle school student, you may not be using the word professionalism. You may be saying stuff like, be on your best behavior, or act like you would if your family was in the room present, or ideally the internal motivator would be for students to just have these qualities, talk about professionalism, because this is what they want for themselves. So when in doubt, always try and push that intrinsic motivation, so that students can want to represent and be the best that they can be. But the reality is they are going to be influenced by their peers, and that may be the motivation behind it. But a student that's arriving late to class, these are very well habits that are probably going to stay with the student well beyond high school. Texting under the desk, using inappropriate language, stealing, because I just had the recent example of that, and then unable to disconnect from social media. Students may be doing these things and not realizing that when they enter the workforce, that these behaviors, if continued, are going to reflect negatively on them. So you always have to make the connection. You may not even use the word professionalism depending on the age of the student, but noting that the behavior is not the true best representation of themselves is the language that you would need to use to help that student understand and to begin to understand the concepts of professionalism. So what is some things that you can use? And if you have others, please put it in the chat. But what is some motivation if a student is not acting professional after you've defined it and talked about it? What is the motivation? So for a middle school student, the motivation could be, well, in high school, you want to be your best representation. So please, stop doing X, Y, and Z. Future teachers. So, hey, you're going to get this person next year, and they're going to want to make sure that you are, that you're not acting in this way, and you want to make them proud. And then if some of the students get summer jobs, you want to use that as when you get your summer job, you're not going to act that way. You want to make sure you stand out and get the highest paid job for the summer possible. So those are some things that maybe a middle school student you can use as the motivation for trying to be the best that they can be. For high school, talking about college and making sure they represent themselves in college. Relationships, if they start to form relationships, wanting them to be their true ideal selves in relationships. Sometimes you have to wave around the recommendation letter. Well, if you want a recommendation letter from myself or from your colleagues, you want to make sure you present yourself in the best image possible. Or if students decide to go straight to work, talking about the importance of professionalism in that aspect and practicing those behaviors now. Now, for yourself, if you are experiencing burnout or you are just needing that extra push and that extra motivation to deliver your very best every day at work, then you think about career advancement. For teachers, maybe you want to be administrators, deans, principals. For those principals, maybe you want to be superintendents. For those superintendents, maybe you want to run for office. So whatever your career advancement is. And then just personal satisfaction, waking up and knowing that this is the best you can be. And ideally, as I stated previously, the motivation for everyone would be you're doing this for yourself. You're doing this because you want to be the best representation of you and put your best foot forward to make a positive impact in life. But some students at the age may not understand that, or just may not be thinking about that and need external influences. So think about the motivation, think about your classroom and the behaviors you see, and then what you can use to help motivate them. And for some circumstances, it may be individual motivation, because as we know, what motivates one may not motivate the other. So I like to break it down simply so that you can remember. So I call it the ABCDEs of professionalism. So I think that's an acronym that could be easily remembered. And the A stands for attitude, B stands for behavior, and attitude and behavior can go hand in hand for the most part. C is communication, D is dress, and E is ethics. So attitude, behavior, communication, dress, and ethics. And if you're uncomfortable using the word professionalism or think that when you say it, students are not getting it, then please try this ABCDE method. And this is information I would hope that you can also share with students when you're teaching them about professionalism, regardless of what subject that you're teaching. So let's go with A, attitude. And that's something, especially with the young students, that you can recognize right away which students have a poor attitude and which students have a good attitude. Of course, you'll reflect that on their report card, when talking with parents on parent-teacher night, but attitude is something you could address frequently, and reminding students when they have a poor attitude, not just ignoring it, but how this is going to play out when they have the motivation that they have, whether it be high school or motivation. So do not ignore, even if you've mentioned things several times, do not ignore the attitude, so that way the student can start to understand what that means and what that translates to for them being the best self that they can be. So B are some behaviors, and these are things you're going to start noticing. And I have a theory, it's not scientific, but that the behaviors that you display when you're a child, those behaviors are likely going to be what you demonstrate as an adult. For example, I remember when it was the 5th grade, and we had I think it was winter break, and we used to have for every chapter in spelling, you used to have to write the word like 10 times, put the word in a sentence, and do something else, like write the words in reverse alphabetical order. Well, there were about 25 chapters, and I spent the entire winter break getting ahead and finishing all the chapters. And I was very proud of that. Mr. Perry was my 5th grade teacher. Shout out to him. But I saw that, and I see that same get ahead, work in advance, don't wait to the last minute, like that's followed me. And I still have that same frame of mind. I also have bad habits, but of course I'm not going to talk about that on this workshop. That would not be professional. But the thing is that if these habits, good or bad, can either be noticed or shined upon, then because likely these students are going to have these habits. So being prepared, you see when a student comes to your class, if they've done the homework or not, these are behaviors that they're displaying in school. Building confidence, if the students are supportive of one another, and that would be a way to build confidence. Class attendance, if students showing up, not cutting class, tying that into professionalism. Waking up on time, sometimes the problem is you don't wake up on time, so you don't get to class on time. Staying in a good mood. You may notice some students changing behavior and moods depending on the situation. Some of that may be out of their control. Some of that may be because some of our students are on medications, the medications that they're on, but just recognizing that change in behavior and encouraging the students to stay in a good mood. Being responsible, if you give a task and the student fulfills or not fulfills the task, simple things like giving them lineup duty, or having them pay attention during your morning meetings, or so them being responsible are the behaviors that you can start to notice at an early age and through high school. Asking for help, rewarding students for asking for help, don't letting that be a negative thing or have a negative stigma. So those are professional behaviors that you can recognize in your students right now. And of course, perhaps the most important thing, being honest. Because that, if it's something that you want to flag early on and address, because that is something that can, if a student gets away with it or it's ignored when they're younger, then they possibly would increase that behavior. and see how much more they can get away with. So these are some professional behaviors that you can see in your classroom right now that you can help with. Communication, and you see this every day in your classrooms, whether it's verbal or nonverbal, because some of our students that we have in our classrooms are not comfortable with verbal communication. So it's all about, what type of growth do you see in the student, and are they communicating in a professional manner, and pointing that out to them when you have good communication and highlighting the good, and then when you have bad communication, whether students are bullying each other or not paying attention, not listening to directions. If you give directions and the students are not understanding that, then enforcing those communication skills. So definitely communication, and the nonverbals, keeping students aware of their nonverbals. D is dress, and that's going to be relative, probably something you wouldn't, depending on your school and the dress code. I can give an example of my niece. When she was in the 3rd grade, the school had a dress code, but she wasn't complying with the dress code. And every time we talked to her about it, she was like, well, I got special permission from the principal that I don't have to be in dress code. So we didn't really think anything of it. And 2 months later, there was like a parent-teacher night. So we went, and my sister-in-law talked with the teacher, and the teacher was like, oh, I heard she had special permission from the principal. And then the principal was like, well, we heard she had special permission from the teacher. So this young, wonderful woman played all of us into thinking that she could not be compliant with the dress code. The reason why I say that is, A, this is going to be a reflection on her behavior and things we need to address, but also, dress is important and an indicator of how students will behave if they're trying to get away with that now. And there's some people, most students I know hate the uniform policy, but we know it's there in place for good intentions with some schools. And if you see a student dressing inappropriately, if there's a dress down day, maybe showing too much skin or wearing too tight of clothes or too loose of a clothes, then just having that conversation with the student about what that's going to look like, and then throw in that motivation when they're in high school, when they're in relationships, when they go to work, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, for you, how you dress, the mantra is dress for the part you want, not for the part you have. So if you are a teacher and you want to be a principal or a superintendent, or if you're working in the district and want your supervisor's job, then think about how you should be presenting yourself. And then E is for ethics, and that's ethical decision making. So I'm going to try and show this video that I think will be a good indicator and talk about ethics. So we'll see if we hear sound.
This movie, then visit brainpop.com for much more. Say what? Dear robot ethicist, Mr. Anderson pays me $6 an hour to mow his lawn. It usually takes me 2 hours, but last week I got it done 30 minutes faster. He already paid me in advance. Is it ethical for me to keep the money? From Amber. You're the paper's new ethics columnist? Okay, let's see your response. Dear Amber, ethical schmethical, just live in the moment. Best, Moby. Do you even know what ethics is? All right, how should I begin? If you've ever watched a nature video, you may have noticed that animals behave a little selfishly. They act on their urges without much regard for other creatures. People are a little different. We care about how our actions will affect others. But we are part of the animal kingdom, so we still struggle with selfish urges. We want stuff for ourselves, whether it's food and money, or more complex things like love and popularity. Can you imagine what would happen if everyone acted on these desires? Yep, total breakdown in society. Fortunately, we've evolved a sense of morality, or right and wrong. This sense guides us to believe in certain values. Lying is wrong, kindness is good, that sort of thing. Values, in turn, help us make ethical decisions, choices that we feel good about. So you can think of ethics as a set of guidelines for behaving morally. Well, let's take this first letter of yours. If you take $12 for mowing the lawn in 90 minutes, your wage will be $8 an hour. That's deceptive because you agreed to work for $6 an hour, and lying is morally wrong. Why? Well, our inner moral sense tells us it is. That's why so many ethical systems forbid it. Most religions and philosophies frown on dishonesty, and our legal codes prohibit certain kinds of lying too. It's a crime to make false statements to the police or in a court of law. And if you're in business, it's illegal to make false claims to the public. It might help Amber to imagine herself in Mr. Anderson's place. No one likes being lied to. Mr. Anderson might not trust her to mow his lawn again if he finds out. Amber should admit that it only took 90 minutes to mow the lawn and offer to give $3 back. She might lose a couple bucks, but her reputation is more important than money. Anyway, that was an easy one. What else have you got? Dear Robot Ethicist, yesterday, I caught my friend Steve cheating off my test. He's never done it before, and he begged me to keep it secret. If his parents find out, he'll be grounded for weeks. What should I do? From Anthony. This one's a bit trickier. We know that cheating is wrong, and every school has rules against it. On the other hand, friendship carries its own ethical obligations. Friends should be loyal and try to help each other out. By telling your teacher, you'd be betraying Steve. Yep, it looks like we've got an ethical dilemma, a situation with no clear-cut right answer. It may seem silly, but making a list of arguments for each action can be super helpful. The school code prohibits cheating, and you can get in trouble if your teacher finds out. But your friend will fail the test and get grounded if you say something. Still, friendship cuts both ways. It wasn't fair for Steve to put you in this position. There are definitely more reasons to speak up than stay quiet. Unfortunately, there is no formula for acting ethically. You have to judge by the individual situation. Ask yourself, what solution is fairest to all the people involved? Maybe you and Steve could go to your teacher together and tell her about the situation. Steve could ask for a makeup test or promise to do extra credit to keep his grades up. That way, he won't get away with cheating and you won't betray his trust. Nope, I was happy to help, but it wouldn't be ethical for me to answer all your letters. You're going to have to rely on your own moral compass for the rest of these. This explains so many things. Visit us at brainpop.com for more on this topic and hundreds of others. You'll find movies, games.
So I brought this out because I think this is a video that you can show with your students to start the conversation about ethics and get them, for those that are the visual learners, and have them think of it in another way. So feel free to get the link and show the video if you think it would be appropriate to start a good conversation about ethics. But why is it important that we talk about ethics? Well, this is what the research shows. In past decades, it was a struggling student who was more likely to cheat. Today, more above average students are cheating as pressure mounts to be accepted to competitive colleges. And as I told you in the news, we have the celebrities and others that are also in on it and paying, doing unethical things to get their students into these schools because they also feel the pressure. Students who cheat feel justified in their behavior and unfairly disadvantaged if they approach their studies with integrity. Cheating begins in elementary school, where children learn to bend rules to win competitive games against classmates. Young children believe cheating is wrong but could be acceptable under certain circumstances. Middle school students feel increased pressure to be dishonest because there is more emphasis on grades. And cheating peaks in high school when 75% of students admit to some sort of academic misconduct. So as you can see from the research, that what starts out in some circumstances as a minor problem, as students progress and they get away with it, can manifest itself. So when you're talking about professionalism, while there are the A, B, C, D, E's, the ethical decision-making is most likely going to have the biggest impact. And probably also sometimes we'd be uncomfortable as teachers and administrators to approach that. Or just let the judicial system handle it, or just penalize students without having that educational conversation and figuring out why. Why are the students behaving in this manner? So here are some strategies to increase student integrity. And you may want to share this with your administration. Number one, infuse integrity into classroom culture, articulate expectations and reward integrity. And that's important. Sometimes we will quickly to call out when someone is not acting with integrity, but if someone has done so positively, then that's great. And it's also a great way to talk to parents. If you joined me for the conflict resolution workshop, we talked about calling parents and having positive conversation with them instead of always being a negative conversation. So that's one area to do that. Develop a moral vocabulary, and depending on the grade level and the student, you'll have to simplify these definitions, but making sure you're talking about responsibility, respect, fairness, trustworthiness, and honesty. Number three, respond appropriately when cheating occurs. You don't want to ignore it or treat it lightly, but you also don't want to be just purely punitive. You want to be educational as well. Use quotes to ignite meaningful discussion. One of the first workshops we did was the importance of morning meetings. So if you need that recording, please let us know. And that's an opportune time in the morning meeting to put a quote up there and have your students reflect on it. For those that are comfortable verbally, they can do so verbally. For those who are not comfortable verbally, they can write it and post on a wall, or they can draw a picture. So it all depends on the level of your student. And then most importantly is to help students, believe in themselves. And as educators, how can we do that? Well, just by you having your passion for teaching, you're showing that you're giving back to the next generation, being a role model, talking about your values and acting in ways that support those values, even in the most trying times, even during testing time, when stress may be at its highest levels, but providing that support. Realizing that your commitment you're giving freely of your time and you're committed to their talents, being selflessness and then the acceptance of people different from themselves, and you having the ability to overcome obstacles and show students that success is possible. So this may warrant more sharing than you may be accustomed to. So it's all depending on your level of comfortableness with your students, but trying to highlight some of these characteristics that you have and that you maintain growing up, and reminding students of those. So here's an activity. This is geared towards high school students, but you can modify it to middle school as well. And this is something you could do with your students. You can have them define professionalism and then research, whether it be through the internet or if you have some textbooks around, 5 questions about professional attitudes and behaviors, and then have them pair up into small groups. So the think, pair, share philosophy. So these are suggested 5 questions. What does professionalism mean to you? Look up the definition of professionalism and write it here. And for those in middle school, it could be, what does being your best self or being the best that you can be, what does that mean? And focusing on that type of perspective. Number 2, what behaviors and attitudes are common to students or workers who behave professionally? Number 3, how adopting professional behaviors and attitudes help you to be a successful college student? If that's the motivation, you could be a college student. We know students will transition to all sorts of situations. So whether it be the workplace or the workforce or anything, so you can leave that more generic. Which professional behaviors and attitudes will you adopt this semester in this class? And then how will your classmate and the instructor know that you are demonstrating professional behavior? So these are good intentional questions that can get students in the frame of mind of thinking about professionalism. And that's part one of this 3-part activity. Part two is to actually have them throughout whatever time frame you have, whether it be a semester, or a period, to track the student, have them identify five attitudes or behaviors that you want to address, and well, this is what they want to address, but this is what you'll be telling them. And then have them write that down and track it. And these are some, for those who are in middle school, you can do this as well, is when you're asking them to track 5 attitudes or behaviors, giving them even more direction and tying it into school. These behaviors, they could be basic skills like reading, writing, arithmetic, listening and speaking. So having them work towards, being better at that is one aspect. Thinking skills. Maybe they want to address creative thinking, decision-making, problem-solving, empathy, reasoning. Those are all behaviors that they should address with professionalism. And then finally, the third part is exercise. Once they have those questions, once they track them, and then this is to have some intentional reflection. And this could be on a daily basis, a weekly basis, or even a monthly basis, depending on how much time you have. Why did you choose to assess the attitudes and behaviors you listed on your assessment sheet? What have you learned about yourself by honestly assessing professional attitudes and behaviors? What trends or patterns do you notice? What were your greatest challenges? How will you overcome these challenges? Has assessing your attitudes and behaviors been helpful to you or benefited you in any way? What positive changes have you made this semester? And which good habits will you continue next semester? So those obviously you can tweak depending on what you're going to do, but having them reflect in a journal, encouraging them to share it with their family members, having their family members also give them some tips and assess how their performance is. But an activity like this could help start the conversation and prepare students for being professional and giving them a sense of what professionalism looks like. Students have to know how it looks, how it feels, how it tastes. So we need to paint that picture for all of our students. And ultimately, we want students to take personal responsibility through this activity. And you can define these areas as well. Responsibility, exert a high level of effort and perseverance towards goal attainment. Self-esteem, where they believe in their own self and maintain a positive view of self. Social ability, demonstrate understanding, friendliness, adaptability, empathy. Self-management, assess self accurately, set personal goals, monitor progress, exhibit self-control. And then finally, of course, ultimately, when all that is built upon, having the integrity and honesty, choosing ethical courses of actions. So these could be some of the end results of having professionalism and teaching it and really honing on these skills. So as you think about your own professionalism, what's a tip or piece of advice you received that helped you to improve your personal professionalism? Or it could be the professionalism of in the classroom. But from everything you've heard so far, is there anything a tip that you have received to help you improve professionalism? And I'll give it 30 seconds, see if anybody wants to type in. Or if everyone is just so absorbed in the thinking process, they need time to process all this information. All right, so think about that and think about, because while we're doing this presentation, I also want you to think about your own professionalism. So think about how you can, a piece of advice you received and how it impacts you. Oh, maybe we do have a comment, hold on. All right, Jim, thank you very much. Again, always live up to your high standards rather than living down to the standards of others. That is excellent, excellent advice. And one that we need to instill in our youth. But unfortunately, we're in a society that people are always looking at others and comparing themselves to others. But they should be comparing themselves to others that have high standards. So living up to high standards rather than living down to the standards of others. Excellent advice. Jim, you're going to be co-presenting with me this next time I do this workshop. All right, so here are some 5 specific tips. And for those of you watching on demand, I put specifically all the words in there in case you're not able to hear it or you want to copy it down. But tip number 1, when we think about our professionalism as teachers, as educators, what we can do, remember, students watch everything we do, so we must model what we expect. We have to arrive to class on time, be prepared, be organized, make it interactive, allow students into your process, let them see how you plan, how a mess becomes something meaningful, and that's important. It's okay to make mistakes, and having the students watch you use critical thinking to come out of that mistake could be extremely beneficial. Lead by example in every way. We need to show students trust and respect, especially as these 2 behaviors are essential in maturity. So that's tip number 1. And Carrie, thank you for talking about having a positive attitude. That'll definitely be something that we can express and that we can call out students or bring it to their attention if they're acting negatively amongst themselves or to each other and to others. Tip number 2, take the time to really observe kids and listen, highlight their good qualities, and then empower them to help their peers. Pair them up strengths and weakness so that kids can help each other. We talked about this during our differentiated learning webinar. So if you want to look at that, please let us know. The buddy relationship can help students learn to be responsible to someone else. This is good for organizing homework or neatness. Have students keep track of their own progress in a way that is meaningful to them. And I gave you specific activity to help with that. Tip number 3, foster creativity in the classroom by establishing an environment where taking risks is rewarded. The focus can't be on getting it right, but rather trying, experimenting, and innovating. And especially as students are in high school and they are getting ready to maybe they may go to college, or they may just go into business for themselves and be entrepreneurs. These are things that we need to encourage them to do. Celebrate the failed attempts as much as successes, so students continue to take risks, a very important skill for aiding and developing creativity. In addition to this, students need time to practice, give them time in class to work on seeing an idea through until the end. Tip number 4, teach students to use calendars to help them organize and stay on time. Alarms can be set on phones. So, I have about 3 different calendars, but you can use Google Calendar. Or you can go traditional color coding a planner, especially for those students that are visual, and for those students that need the consistency and they need the routine, and calendars and putting those up is extremely important. Aid students, you want them to work on their neatness, punctuality, organization. Encourage students to find a method that works after you've shown them a few different ways. This will help with deadlines as well. They need to know deadlines are a part of life, and the teacher should track and keep record of the late work. This can later be dealt with in an intervention plan, first with the student and then with the parents if it persists, depending on the student's age. Points should be never taken off work because it's late, unless, of course, it's habitual and you are trying to make a point, but telling the students and the parents, why the points are being deducted and what they can do to avoid that. But you want to focus on, for these assignments, for learning, but that'll be a future assessment workshop. And then tip number 5, final tip, follow directions is another important skill. Students should review directions multiple times with the teachers and peers. I remember also in the 5th grade when I got the teacher gave out a test, and there was 100 questions. You had 5 minutes to do it. And then I, of course, was busy trying to get as many answers done when the first directions were like, well, just do question number 1 and 5 and sign your name. So I was victim of that assignment. And it has haunted me to this day because I probably still have a hard time reading directions. But you want to make sure you follow directions and reinforce how important it is that the students follow directions. They should be encouraged to rewrite them in their own words, ask clarifying questions, maintain an open forum during the course of a project. If you want to use technology, then of course you can do a class hashtag, and tools like Edmodo or class blogs can help with that. For more anonymous options, you can try a parking lot with Post-its. This will also help the students that are nonverbal or shy. If you just have a poster up on the in your classroom, call it the parking lot, and then people can put Post-it notes with the questions. Students can also practice important listening skills and questioning skills while following directions. If a student goes astray, assess them on the work provided and have a conversation. And with all these things, set up an intervention plan and allow the child to revise. So in conclusion, we're not going to have time for our Kahoot, but in conclusion, a lot of this is, for us, maybe common sense, but yet, for some reason, there are temptations to not be professional. And it's important that at an early age, we start talking about this concept, maybe not using the word professionalism, but similar conversations like be the best you can be the best representation of yourself, make your parents proud, make whoever proud, even though we want them to do it intrinsically, but you may have to do that. But this is not something that's going to go away. And if we want to shape society, and if we're concerned that the professionalism is diminishing, then we can take steps to do that. Because when we do teach this to our students, this will give them the competitive advantage. This will make them stand out, and this will help them become productive members of society. So remember, professionalism is knowing how to do it, when to do it, and then doing it. All right, so that is it. So we do have some time for questions. If there are any questions, please post that in the chat, or if you have any best practice you would like to share, now would be the time to do so. Also, if there aren't any questions, you can always email me, mrosa@kaiseruniversity.edu, if you need any clarification on anything I talked about today, any advice. I can go hours and hours on each of these letters. So I just wanted to make it condensed and give you some tools to take away to bring to your classrooms. Remember the A, B, C, D, and E, an easy way to talk about professionalism: attitude, behavior, communication, dress, and ethics. So thank you very much.